Hey everybody, we are going to tie a cool little still water leech, and it's one of my favorite color schemes, called the Midnight Fire, and it's a tied balance, so it's going to hang more horizontally in the water when you fish it. So we'll go ahead and get started and just get the thread on the hook, and then we'll tie in our pin. So what I like to do is just lay down a little base of thread so it gives the pin a little bit to grab onto. And so what I've done is I've grabbed my bead and I've taken the pin and just trimmed it. I think these are 1 1/4 satin pins, 1 1/16. So it's a Dritz brand satin pin. Nickel-plated steel for extra strength, and you just get these at Walmart or Hobby Lobby, literally. And you search, if you go to Amazon and search 116900 satin pins, boom, you get 500 for like $3 or something. That's crazy. So we're not going to sell them on our website. So what I'm going to do is I want the pin to be balanced right at the edge of the eye, and that's where I'll just tie that on. Now there's kind of two schools of thought here on pins. I've seen some people like to get the smaller sized pins and then you don't clip them. My problem with those is they're usually not as strong. So I've never had one of these bigger ones bend out. The only thing is you just have to be a little bit careful with your thread as you go around that little sharp edge. Now if you want, sometimes I'll keep a little file handy and just kind of file down those edges. And I want this to go, about halfway back on the shank of the hook. So kind of like that. And then we'll just work our way to the back. Now, one thing, depending on the size of bead you use, this is a 3.5. So it's probably a bit on the bigger end of what I would normally use. So you don't have to extend it off the pin as long, which is another advantage to the longer sized pins, is you can trim them the length you want. All right, so Midnight Fire, it's a mix of colors, so I like to tie the tail in a dual color scheme. This is using the awesome, if you've not tried this is awesome stuff. Nature Spirit bought out the Fish Hunter brand of marabou, and this is black UV with emphasis on the UV, makes it extra saucy. And then I've grabbed the burgundy, and I just create a little dual color tail there. Then I tie in about a hook shank and a half or so, and tie that in right there on the bend. And what you want to do is you'll trim this off, and this creates a way to fill in the little kind of big disparity between the size of the pin and the hook shank. So again, about that much in the length. I've been tending towards getting my leeches and buggers kind of longer tails. I like the movement. And then I'm just going to tie right up to that edge and then trim that off. And we're going to go cover this up so it doesn't have to be perfect right now, but it will have to be perfect in order to catch fish. Okay, and the other thing I've found works really well with my buggers and leeches lately is tying in a good little chunk of flash. So I've got some holographic Flashabou. This is a cranberry color, and you only need like 3 strands or somewhere in that neighborhood. And I'm just going to tie that in right at the tail. And what that'll do is that'll give that a nice bit of visibility in the water, because that stuff reflects like crazy. Now the body is just going to consist of Arizona diamond dubbed in a dubbing loop. So we're just going to build a dubbing loop. I'm grabbing my Loon Gator Grip, or my Loon dubbing spinner, but I've got the Shepherd hook tool to create a dubbing loop. So I'll just go over that, and this is about 2 to 3 times the body length, just as far as distance. We're going to dub it on and brush it out. So we just grab our dubbing, and if you grab it in a clump and then kind of separate it out, the fibers will line up. Or you can pull it from the bag, like a corner of the bag exposed. It's the same, kind of the same effect. And then we're just going to build up our dubbing loop here. Okay, now I've got about 3 or 4 chunks, and it's kind of lined up there. And I'll just twist that spinner, and the weight of it just spins it right up into a nice little rope, like that. And then before I wrap this, I'm going to give it a little bit of brush out with my handy Stomfo Velcro tool. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of tap it like this, and it will pick those fibers out. And I hold my finger against it, and it just kind of holds it in place. And then you can kind of tease it out to the edges. And then from there, I'm just going to spin it on up using the fancy rotary feature on my Renzetti. And I'm going to go right before the eye of the hook. So I'll just be, that's where I'm going to stop this, and then I can kind of unwind my thread a bit. And then I'll just come up behind the thread, cross that over, and then again right at the eye, right at that bend, and then trim that off. Okay, now that's all tied in. I'll brush this out in a sec. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab, and you can do this a couple different ways. One of the things on these, I like to have multicolors. That's one of the things I think like with the Thin Mint and some of these other multicolored, different in tails, kind of difference in the collars. So Cheech spun up some of this squirrel ice dub mix in one of our last videos, and so I snagged some of this as well. And what I've done in the past, I've just used the hotspot bead for the Midnight Fire Leech, and then I'll put like a little collar of straight ice dub or bruiser blend or something that I can kind of comb back over the body. But this squirrel is awesome for leeches. So this is one of the things that I've been messing around with on this pattern. And again, this is more of a style. There's nothing in particular that's magic about this squirrel, but it's a really cool material to mess around with. And so I'm just going to tie in probably a third of the length of the one I did before, and then do the same thing. I'm just going to build up a little quick dubbing loop. Okay, we've got our dubbing in there, twist it up. And then what I'm going to do on this one, because I want this to be more of a collar, I'll take one wrap behind the eye, and then I'm going to start preening this back, and then I'll do a couple wraps in front of the eye, and then just work my way up to behind the bead. And then it just creates a nice little collar for us there. You can see how that collar is nice and buggy. It's got all that squirrel in there. And I'm just going to build up a little bit behind the bead here to secure that. Now I've noticed I've slid a little bit further back on there, so I'm actually just going to tie in, or just throw in a little bit more dubbing to fill that gap. Probably isn't going to matter, but I'm just not liking the way it laid down, so we'll preen this back anyway, so you're not going to be able to tell. So then we'll whip finish. Ideally, you just make your loop a little bigger. I skimped a little on it. grab our little tool again, and then I'm just going to, right behind that bead, make sure I get that teased out because it's roped and not a dubbing loop. And that squirrel goes up your nose.
That feels good.
And then I'm just going to work all that back into the body. And so you can kind of see how it's going from the nice red of the squirrel back into this, our Midnight Fire diamond dub, and then our multicolored tail. And again, this style pattern's really effective. I like balanced patterns quite a bit. So the way you would test the balance nature of it, see if it's actually balanced like you want it, is just take a little bit of tippet and string it in there and just kind of hold it up. And then if this one, say, we're a little off kilter, you just adjust where the bead sits for the next fly you tie, and then you kind of dial it in. It depends on the hook you're using, depends on the material. But anyway, this style of pattern in general is phenomenal on still waters. So I really highly recommend the balance style, and then again the color scheme with the Midnight Fire and multi kind of toned color of it. It's a good one. Give it a try. Midnight Fire Balanced Leech.